that everyone in so far, Hannah?
Yes, that should be everyone in. I'm just going to just make sure there's one or two just still there in the lobby. And yeah, that's everyone at the moment. Thanks, Danielle.
Perfect. No worries. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight, just to kind of run through something that's a little bit different, but we kind of feel that there's a lot of value in it for those that obviously want to learn a little bit more about analysis, but from a slightly different perspective. I'm hosting the event, so I'm not going to be talking anymore so beyond this initial sort of introductory phase and towards maybe the end. But before I introduce Randall, just a couple of sort of housekeeping things, I suppose. We are recording this session, just so that obviously we've got an audit of the session itself, and obviously should anybody want to see it, etc., we've got that to hand. So if you do have any issues with that, please sort of just pop it into the chat. I think you have access to the chat. You don't necessarily have to go into detail, just maybe say that you'd like to discuss what we're using this for, and it's not going to be used in any way that I guess sort of exploits anybody's sort of personal details, etc. So it'll be very confidential. It's just purely based on what the session is about and giving more detail about what Randall's going to speak to you about. In terms of how we're going to work this session, I'll introduce Randall in a second. He'll then obviously take you through the content for tonight's sort of webinar, but then there will be an opportunity at the end to address some questions that you might have. So we're not sort of saying keep your questions till the end. You can feed them into the chat as we go through, as you sort of think of them, but to kind of keep the continuation and the flow of what Randall is saying so that we don't disturb his presentation. We'll address all of them at the end, and then we'll sort of pick up on any opportunities that might follow on off the back of some of those answers to those questions. So moving into introducing Randall now. So you can see that it's Andrew Randall Rains, but he goes by Randall. So please don't be confused that we've got the wrong person, because we haven't. And Randall's generously offered to give up his time to obviously take us through the next hour in relation to his role that he does with St Helens Rugby League Football Club. But it's kind of analysis with a twist. So it allows us to look at things like head injury assessments and other aspects from an injury perspective of how analysis can be used. But in addition to that, Randall's also a PhD student, and is currently looking at how performance analysis is integrated with multidisciplinary teams in relation to how that can inform better decision making and justification in those decisions. So Randall, if you're happy, I will turn my camera off so that you're not distracted. And is that okay?
Yeah, not sweet. That's good. Yeah.
Perfect. No worries.
Did you say everybody's getting questions at the end, or
along? So they can pop questions in the chat as they go through, just in case there's something immediately that they think of, and maybe forget that as we start going through. But we'll address them all once you've finished, so that you don't have to feel interrupted and can just kind of continue through the presentation. Yeah.
Cool. No worries. Awesome.
No worries. Over to you.
Yeah. Cheers. Thank you. For those on the call, obviously, thank you very much, and obviously anybody looking back as well, thank you for getting involved with this. Sort of my main role before we go into more of this is the head injury assessments within St Helens. So it's primarily the home games that we look at. So every home game, each team has to allot some sort of system, because sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's a system, but we won't go to do much with that. To look at the concussion side of the sport, but generally as well, we look at all injuries and all aspects of it. So at every St Helens home game, which is who I work with, I'm looking at all the head injuries assessments for that. Not only as well do I look at the head injury assessments for St Helens as the the home team, I also look at the away team. So whoever it is, recently it was Wigan Warriors last Friday, I think. So any of them, I'm looking at theirs as well. So as you go through this, you might sort of hear me flittering between teams, and it seems normal for me, and that's because it is. I look at both. Certainly, some of the examples I've got today are Salford. If you are of a bit of a nervous disposition, you're not going to see blood and guts and stuff like that, but you will see a couple of people in a bit of a bad way. But I'll let you know now that they were fine, in the end, and they continued playing after the protocols had been met 2 or 3 weeks ago. So Just thought I'd spread that on you. So yeah, head injury assessments and others. I might call them HIAs. What we're going to look at today is sort of what is concussion, and this has probably gone off what I've been fed in terms of what we're sort of looking at. We're going to look at what part does performance analysis play within concussion assessment. So again, that's just with my role, because again, at other clubs, etc., they may run it slightly differently. I'm also going to look at the concussion assessment. How do I assist with other subject matter experts? So whether that's the physio or the doctors, they're the primary ones. Sometimes it also involves the players. But yeah, we're going to look at other injuries and assessments, and sort of how they're assessed. And for number 2 and number 4, by the way, I'll hopefully be talking you through some live examples that have actually happened. And then number 5, we'll just look at the wider scope of the concussion injuries, sort of maybe what's brought about this type of element and maybe where it's going in the future. Okay, so hopefully that's all right as a bit of a content. So hopefully you're going to see what we've got coming ahead. So first of all, what is concussion? I'll read it out and hopefully you can follow. But yeah, concussion is a sudden but short-lived loss of mental function that occurs to a blow or other injury of the head. Okay, so that's technically what I'm looking for. So when things are happening on the pitch, whether it be a head-on-head collision, it can potentially be the ball as well. I've not seen the ball cause this type of thing at the moment, but I know within the Welsh football game, I think it was Williams, he got struck with a ball to the head, and he was showing signs of concussion. I don't know where it was graded at, but yeah. It can go face to face. It can obviously be other body parts, head to head. It could be with a post. I've not seen that. It can also be with the ground, which we do see quite common as well. So any sort of head blow, impact, etc. That's what we're looking for. And the medical term for concussion is obviously a minor traumatic brain injury, and that's from the NHS. Sort of to go with that, I know like the NHS very much it's minor, and a lot of these can be. There's a lot of times when our players take blows to the head, whether it be from an opponent, the ground, etc., and they continue, because they can be quite minor or insufficient or etc. But there also can be long-term effects from some of this, which is where I step in, and we can assess instantly whether a person is going to be long-term or not. And some of them are pretty obvious. So the last one I show you is, it's just an obvious case. The guy is out cold, so it's very obvious. But some of them may change, or as the impact happens, it's like, is it really long-term? Is it a big one? Is it a minor? Can they still continue? Do they have to come off, be assessed, and then go back on? Yeah, and that's what I essentially assist with. I don't have the power myself to pull a person off the pitch. Yeah, I'm sat there with a computer, but the doctor that I speak to does have that power. Yeah, so they can walk onto the pitch. The game actually stops when they walk on the pitch, and they have the power to pull a player off the field to play. No questions asked. Where that obviously a few years ago wasn't the case. You get people running on, come on, you're coming off. The players know I'm staying on, and they did. But that's because our knowledge of concussion and other head injuries was limited. Yeah, but it's obviously coming more to fruition these days. Just to sort of add on to that, so this is from BMJ. Matthew Johns is obviously the medical there. But a mild traumatic brain injury is a head injury due to a direct blow to the head or deceleration of the head as well. So when you see people hitting the ground, it is a full-on deceleration. And then again, it's from an impulse force that results in a change of mental status. And it's that mental status that we assess and we can see. And we can see it through a variety of different things. But that's what we're looking for, is there a change in mental status? So hopefully that, without getting too sort of like biological about what happens in the brain, what happens in the head, etc. Hopefully that just gives you a bit of an insight into sort of like why I'm looking at this and certain different elements. yeah, without going into, you know, brains moving in the body and the skull and stuff like that. But yeah, and I say the majority of our injuries, head injuries, etc., they do a full protocol, etc. They come out of it, they're fine. But that's obviously the way where we've developed. So I'm going to show you some live examples. I'm hoping like this is going to work, by the way, because I'm going to have to stop sharing this and go into my environment. So if I press stop presenting, share my screen, hopefully somebody who's on the call could tell me if they can see this, maybe Danielle.
We can see that, Randall.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the system that I use. This is Huddle. Other people use Knack Sports and a couple of other things. It all depends upon what's happening in the game. Sometimes we are coding. So these are just like the technical and tactical areas. Yeah, which obviously can be coded as well. Either I can code them, but I generally don't. You know, because there's not much use for myself as my primary role. And I actually got these streamed. Yeah, for the data points, which then fulfills my matrix. So that's another way you can do it. And then I can tag, as you see down here, I can tag what I want on my, you know, as I'm going along, etc. I do tag the tries because most people like obviously the tries, etc. But the main ones we'll look at is the injuries. So you've got Saints injuries there and Salford injuries. Every one of these is obviously an injury. So for Salford here, every single one of these is an injury. And it might just be an injury that's nothing's come of it. But some of them are, and I'm going to look at two of them. So this is Liam Ackers. I'll play it through, but I'll tell you which person you're going to look out for. Okay, so our player kit picks it up here. Okay, and you're going to be looking for, I think it's this one here. Okay, but you're looking for a Salford player. Yeah, so that's what I'll have seen live as it happens. So instantly, sort of, obviously, players are already, so you know, Big Year is obviously been showing a bit of concern. Obviously, their other players are. So instantly, I'm going backwards now. So I have this up. I've already clipped it. As we're coming in here, obviously now what I'm looking for are points of contact. So where is the head contacted? Yeah, and that's really big for us because if it's a jaw, they're potentially not likely to have suffered as much as if it was a temple. That's from my experience, by the way, and through what I've spoke to maybe doctors as well, because some people may disagree with that. You know, a head injury is a head injury, and obviously boxing, you look after your chin and stuff like that. But it's just from what I've seen. But yeah, so obviously that's happened. I'm now coming back. What's the point of impact? Obviously at this moment, I'm sort of guessing a little bit. Okay, so it's obviously this guy here. But one of the great things about this is now we can zoom in. Yeah. Maybe with a bit of rugby knowledge, he's got his head on the wrong side of the player. Yeah, it should not be there. And we're potentially looking at a hip. So it's a hip to head. Yeah, that's what we're looking for there. When I spoke to the doctors, they were quite happy that it was sort of head to hip as well. And obviously your hip's pretty solid. So yeah, that's one of the things we're looking for. There, obviously, it looks like it could be an elbow. But when you look on the previous frames, his elbow's above. So sometimes you've got to go like and know the system itself as well. And this is the problem when you have, well, Sky Sports edited this, which is fine. You know, they have really good stuff. But you have to be aware of that when the, because I just get their stream. So when the producer goes, move, 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 yeah, you've got to be careful. So it's not an elbow, even though it looks like it is on there. It's because Benno's turning. Yeah. So we're happy that it's hip. So there's contact to the head. So there has been contact to the head. Yeah. Next thing we're looking at, by the way, I do this a bit quicker live. Can I just say that? I'm obviously talking through it. Does the player look to protect themselves when they go down? Yeah. Or are they looking at the ball Are they trying to get the next person? You know, because that is showing, you know, that mental capacity, which is obviously what we looked at now. Obviously, the definition's given. So from this, no, they're not looking to protect themselves. They're potentially not looking at the ball. Yeah. So there's another thing that would grade the concussions a bit differently. Anything that's a grade 1 is you know, you straight off, no returning. I think it goes up to grade 4, which is sort of insufficient, although that might change at the start of the season. That's the doctor's job. The reason why I'm being a bit fluffy with that is because that's not my role. My role is to provide the information that then informs our subject matter experts, usually a doctor when it's a head injury. When it's any other types of injury, usually a physio. So yeah, doesn't look to protect himself. And is there a secondary contact with the floor? In this instance, when you play it on, there is a slight contact with the floor. Okay. So therefore, we've had potentially 2 impacts within this one thing. He's not protecting himself. He's potentially, well, a change in mental status. And so that's some of the stuff that we're looking for. And I will talk through this with the doctor, and they will talk to it through me as well. Then the interesting thing is we're looking at how long does it take him to move. Well, actually, he moves straight away. And that's quite positive for players. Players that move straight away, it's really positive. Now, I appreciate he looks to stand up, falls back, and then stands up. Okay, so still not with it, still in a different mental capacity, but it's a good sign that he's moved. Yeah, because obviously in the next clip that I show you, the person doesn't move. So yeah, gets up, and then obviously he's uneasy on his feet. Yeah, very, very quickly our physio, it's their physio, has recognised it. They're obviously offering their assistance. Yeah, so hopefully that makes sense of some of the stuff that we look for. Those are some of the major stuff, and I'll keep going through it as we go into the next clip. But certainly, you know, those are some of the big things, and it's hard because every single case is different. Yeah. One thing to note, obviously, is looking at our player as well. Are they okay? I don't think I get it on this bit because I've only tagged the Salfords on this little clip. But you know, how good is our player as well? Show you another one. Okay, so it's I'll show you where it is. It's quite obvious, this one. Again, if you have a nervous disposition, you know, you don't have to look at, there's no blood, there's no nothing like that. You just see the person knocked out. It's the person who's about to receive this ball. Yeah. Okay, so I've seen that quickly. I think when I mute it, I swear as well. I was like, oh, something's going to happen here. But again, right, let's go to the video. Can we see a point of impact? Okay, we can see maybe a point of impact here. Okay, with a knee. It turns out to be the knee, by the way. Okay, so that's one thing that we're looking for. It's a knee to the head. Yeah. When we zoom out, is he protecting himself? No. Is there a secondary contact with the floor? Yes. Okay, and it doesn't need a genius to work that he is out cold. Yeah, there are obviously players scrambling around, etc. as well. They're aware of what's happening. Okay, so you know, this one's quite an obvious but an easy one to assess, but still, can we get some information on there still to protect the player? Yeah, so now what I will look for is how long does it take the player to move? Yeah, and I potentially time this. So I know he's patting his head, by the way. That means head injury. So you know, that's quite common. But I'm looking at how long it takes to move. Now there's a little movement there, but is that through him? Is it not? Yeah, at this stage I would suggest that he's still out. Yeah, when the medical staff get to him, which is pretty quick, yeah, the cameras unfortunately move away. They said that they got there and he was still out of it. Okay. One doctor will run to me. Our club doctor will potentially be around this, because they will also be mic'd up, so we can talk to them directly. Yeah. Salford's physio is obviously already run on, and he's grabbing the head, looking after that, and then this is their doctor as well. Okay. So I'm sat with their doctor going, these are the possible impacts. Sorry, I'm sat with my doctor this at the moment. Yeah. So these are and we can feed it through to their doctor as well. Just where are these points of contact, etc. Now, obviously, because it's Sky, they don't give replays of this until later on, right? But really interesting, obviously, I'm looking at our player and going, right, well, where's his injury? Because that might give us some indication about what has been hit. Yeah, that's the boss, the former boss, sorry. There's obviously been a bit of movement now, so I can see that. So I could potentially say how long it's gone on for. If he was flat out, that foot would still be flat. So I can give a rough estimate to how long it may have taken to move. But again, if the cameras aren't on it, I missed that. So it's a limitation of the system, right? But it's still relevant information. By the way, I saw him move at this time. Yeah, and we can give that timeline. Yeah. So yeah, looking at our player, they assess his knee. Yeah. Okay, so I would guess. Well, I say guess because it is still a little bit of a rough estimate at the moment that it's with his knee, but it's not too much. When we move it on, obviously now it's all player welfare. They're all looking at him, etc. Okay, and actually, eventually, he actually stands up. Yeah, so he moves there and he actually stands up and comes off. Okay, which is really good and really positive to see. It's on the 76 minutes, and under the protocols, you have to be off no matter what for 10 minutes anyway. He's not coming back on. That's a given. But it's just something, maybe extra in other cases that you're coming off for a minimum of 10 minutes. So if you get knocked out on the 70th minute, even if you feel as fresh as the days in, you could potentially return to the pitch. You're not allowed. Yeah. You have to have that 10 minutes to sit with the doctor, to go through the proper protocols, etc., to have a look at all this type of stuff. But yeah, just really, really positive. Eventually, with this one as well, what it's nice to use is that we actually get eventually the other angles. So again, I'll play these through for you. So some stuff as well, which is good to know. When he's obviously made contact there, see how his head comes through the gap? Because otherwise what you might have is what's called a crusher tackle, where essentially you're trying to put pressure on the back of the neck. So luckily, it doesn't do that. It goes through the gap. So again, that's just more information. So when they're asking about his spine and how does it look, well, we can say potentially, yeah, all this has happened, but there's been no part of a crusher. Yeah, which could help obviously assess the spines, etc. I think this was obviously the definitive angle. Yeah, so obviously that was the shot. Obviously that their doctor came over and we showed, and they were quite happy. Knee to temple, instantly knocked out. Potentially on a 2-week protocol, return to play. Which I say is right, because this was end of season. This was like the last game. So if you won or lost, it was that. So obviously Salford did lose in the end. So he was obviously out for the rest of the stuff. Yeah. Cool. So there you go. And he does walk off, which is quite nice to know. He went straight into the changing rooms, and the doctor came and sat with me, and we did some more assessment. So yeah, cool. Hopefully, I know it's a little bit fast, but hopefully you've got some pointers from that at least. How do I stop sharing? How do I get back to the presentation? That's what I'm now going to try and work out.
Hannah, are you
If
able
you-
to re-upload it or?
Yep, I'll upload it now for you.
I'll tell you what.
Okay.
What I'll do to save us keep going in and out, I'll show them how to do the other assessments, other injuries, shall I?
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks,
It
Randy.
just saves us going in and out.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be a
Perfect.
little bit more seamless, sorry.
Not at all. This is great. Thanks, William.
But obviously not. Let me just load these ones up, sorry. That's one of them there. Let's reshare. So can you see the second game?
Yep,
Yeah,
I
we
can
can see
indeed.
that.
Yeah, perfect. So not all injuries, as I say, are all to do with the head. We do look at other parts of the body as well, etc. And some of them are quite confusing, but we'll go through the protocol anyway. The guy that you're going to look for is this guy here, Maguire. They will play it through, number 13. Okay, so is this player here? Yeah. So looking through this, really interesting, because the only thing that actually gave us away that he had an injury was the fact that he held the back of his knee. Yeah. Then obviously as he's moved away, he's still holding the back of his knee, and then he's hobbling away. So then we're going, right, okay. So hopefully that makes sense. One of the things that we're going through here now is what's happened. So it's obviously this leg here, but we can't really sort of see much because obviously there's a player in the way. Yeah, which is why having that other subject matter expert who can feed information on as well is quite useful in this instance. He said it was a twist in the knee. That's what we got later, by the way. That he's twisted his knee. Yeah. So, but we can't really see that and it's interesting because if that's where he's done it, because that's the only thing we could have seen, he still continues to walk. Yeah, he's still fighting for that. Then he holds the back of his leg. Yeah. So this is why some of them can be quite hard. Yeah. One thing to note though, and maybe I've skipped ahead of myself, so I apologise, is that we also have to clear the head. I've cleared it because I already know about this incident. But you're looking at, right, is there any contact to the head? There's none there. Yeah, I know it sounds daft, but that's obviously the main priority, the concussion. Nothing there. All with his injuries. Yeah. And then obviously holding the back of his leg. Yeah. Interesting that when he walks off, he does like a little kick out here. Yeah. So there's obviously some sort of injury there. We get their physio on to see. Obviously, they want to come and check that injury, etc. So yeah, it's quite an interesting one. Let's have a look at the other injuries. I've tagged these. Sorry if you can hear some stuff in the background. Okay. So yeah, Minikin. So I'll play this one through. It's one of the wire players again. So it's to play with the ball. Okay. So really interesting again. So obviously their doctors come, can we just see the injury, what's occurred? Because they can't see anything. And this is the beauty now of what we do and the system does, etc. They can't see the mechanics of it. Yeah. They just know that he's injured. The way he walks off as well, then haunches on his leg. But they want to know the mechanics. So a physio may come up to me as well and see this. But so as we're looking here, it's not the tattooed leg, believe it or not. So it's not this leg being hung on to here. It's the opposite leg. And the great thing is here, I could show it here. Yeah. See the twist here? So he's obviously his leg's planted. There's a slight twist in his knee. Yeah. Then I think his bell adds weight to it. Yeah. So you've got them mechanisms there that have caused this injury. Yeah. So again, looking at him down there. Next time you try and watch a game, whether it be rugby or football, whatever like that, try and have a look at the injury side of it. I have a colleague of mine who's sort of second in command to me, and he finds this stuff really hard to assess. Why? Because he's always looking at the ball. Yeah. And the key is never to look at the ball or not to look at the ball. It's to look at players. Yeah, it can be quite difficult. It's funny watching him because he struggles. Yeah. So he's already watching the ball, and I'm like, player on his haunches. Yeah. They break down the wing as well. Right, but hopefully that explains some other sort of thing. Is obviously, again, like I've mentioned, by the way, the head will be cleared. There is no contact to the head. There is none when it hits the ground. Yeah, moves forward. So yeah, we do assess other injuries as well. They were just some of the sort of mixed ones, if that makes any sense. But you know, I could go through all these. I could sit here all day, and you'd probably be bored by the end of it. Hopefully not. But yeah, cool. Hopefully that sort of shows the other injury side of it. But as I said, majority of it is we're looking at the HIAs. But we do look at that stuff as well. Are we able to get the presentation back up again? Sorry.
That was brilliant, Andrew. Thanks a million. Yeah, it's just uploading there now. One moment there,
Brilliant.
please.
Cheers. Thank you. No worries. There's no rush. Oh yeah, perfect.
Brilliant. Thanks a million.
Perfect. So yeah, hopefully those are live examples. There is much more that goes into detail, but these are sort of the main areas. So how do we assist with the other subject matter experts? So I just want to talk maybe through the process of it, although I might have already alluded to anyway. That as soon as there's an injury on the pitch, yeah, I tag it. So you know, I'll give it that sort of timeline. I will maybe add a note to it as well. As that's happening, a doctor from, generally, if we look at our team, St Helens, they come in, sit next to me, we are watching the video clip. At that same time, another doctor or physio has run to the pitch to assist the player. Yeah. From there, myself and the doctor, we're looking through the video, assessing it. The doctor will also be getting fed information through from the pitch side to say this is what they're saying, this is what they're feeling, or what's happened, they think has happened, and we can confirm or deny that. Yeah. We also may come up with other stuff ourselves, maybe that wasn't first seen on the incident, because even that, you know, that Minikin one, how did he twist his knee? It wasn't really, nobody could see it on the pitch, but I obviously did through the system. So we talked through that. Generally speaking, if it's a head finger, then I will then clip it. So I will then clip it and send it to the doctors. Well, it's usually their phone that they have, so I just airdrop it to them, and that's quite vital for them when they're doing their assessments in the changing rooms or in the medical facility. Yeah, that they can sit with the player, ask them the questions. You know, what happened, and they can confirm it with the video if that actually happened or not. You know, so as a whole process, that's generally what happens. Yeah. Long term, longitudinally, I obviously then have a bank of information, you know, in terms of every single game that's gone on. Well, certainly for the past season and a half that I've been doing this role. So again, I have that potential to tag into, right, well, how long was it since they received their last one? We had a player at the start of this season who took quite a severe blow, was graded as grade 1, I think it was. So therefore missed 2 weeks. Came back to play, took another head knock. Yeah, and therefore, but because of that prior knowledge and stuff, I mean, we already knew that he'd already had that because it was in a short period of time. But I can still track all that type of stuff. He had one this time. He's had one this time. You know, and again, it just adds value to the thing, because obviously, if it was a little bit further through the weeks, we could maybe not know a time, etc. But all of that's in the bank. You know, and that's part of archiving stuff. Yeah. They can also assist me as well, because if they know about prior injuries, so I can go, oh, this person's hobbling, etc. Why? They can, you know, feed me information, and we can share information that way. But the whole point of this is that we're trying to work together. So myself as the assessor, doctors, physios, doctors on the pitch, opposition doctors, to try and allow them to make better decisions. Yeah. So hopefully that helps a little bit. But that's essentially how we help each other. There are other caveats to it, but I don't think, they're the main caveats. And every so often you get the CEO coming over and just going, can I just see that incident happen there and stuff like that? But, and other coaches and stuff like that, it's fine. But yeah, that's not the main focus. The main focus of the system is all injury based. Somebody else does the technical, tactical elements. Cool. I've obviously shown you some other injury assessments, so how they're done. So you clear the head, sort of go through the assessment, generally with the physio instead of that. But yeah, there is sort of a wider scope to all of this sort of concussion injury assessment. So insurance is one of the big debates at the moment. So our sport actually struggled to get insurance for the actual whole entire sport. We ended up being with one company, and that obviously one company we're very grateful for. Our premiums are obviously through the roof. So one of the things that they've been looking for is how can it reduce the premiums? Yeah, and this is one way that they think that it's going to happen long term. In terms of, right, we've got these systems in place, can it reduce it? Yeah, because it reduces the long term effects of player injury and therefore less likely to make claims, for example. So that's where some of this is potentially coming to it. Now, the debate is whether the HIA has triggered insurance or the insurance has triggered the HIA, which one's triggered which. But it's certainly still something that's in there. Interestingly, not as a bullet point, but the game can no longer start without a HIA protocol in place, without the system. So again, sometimes it's me. Sometimes it's some sort of other system. But the game can actually not go ahead till this system's in place. And some of it is to do with insurance, I believe. Some of it is obviously, we just want to look after players. Yeah. But if this system isn't up and running from the first kickoff, yeah, so obviously 5 minutes before kickoff is fine. They have known to halt a game. I'm trying to remember the game that they have halted this season. There was one. It didn't start till 15 minutes later because the system wasn't in place due to a functionality error, I believe, as I'm aware. So yeah, that game kickoff was delayed because of it, and I believe some clubs have actually received sanctions from it because they didn't have adequate things in place. So we're actually that wider scope as well. We're actually there for the game as well, and I have to. Before the start of every match, I turn up, put my stuff in place, get it all up and running, and then go speak to the match commissioner. And I've showed them that the system is live and active. They generally come around, obviously, at kickoff and check that it is actually still working. It has been known to crash, obviously, but it's fine. It doesn't go against any of the sanctions there. But generally speaking, it's back up and running within a matter of a minute or etc. So yeah, that's some of the wider impacts. So you've got the game itself, you've got insurance, and obviously player welfare. Maybe lots of people have seen Concussion, the movie. Yeah, obviously based on the NFL players. And our knowledge of concussion is coming through. Better dealing with it on the pitch. Better dealing with injuries and looking after the long term of that player welfare. We can actually show images. We've got a bank of evidence now of injuries that are occurring, etc. Yeah, can we treat players a bit differently and look after them and etc. They'll all do base level tests as well at the start of the seasons to know where they are. So if they are having head difficulties, concussions, etc. We know what their base layer is. Can assess that, and that adds to the player welfare as well. Which I hope makes sense. There's lots more, by the way, a lot more coming. I'll throw in there actually, I remember. We're now developing the use of gum shields. So the gum shields fit in the mouth just as a standard gum shield, and they will tell us impacts that have gone through the head themselves. Yeah, and that's currently being developed and tested. So that will then obviously give us more data and more information. I could then potentially feed that into my system with Huddle. Yeah, and I could say, this is the impact from the gum shield and this is the incident. You know, just adds value to that player welfare and allowing our subject matter experts to make more effective decisions. But yeah, I know they're having some problems in the NFL with it, if I digress a little bit, because the helmets they wear rattle. And it's that rattling that actually triggers some movement, etc. And some impacts that are probably going through the head, but it's not, it's just the things rattling. But we don't have that problem. Cool. So hopefully, just to summarise, concussions obviously more effectively assessed with the introduction of performance analysis. Yeah, hopefully we've seen how that happens, slowing things down, different angles potentially for Sky games or Channel 4 games. So yeah, player welfare can also be tracked live as well as post-match, and obviously through their careers as they go along. Yeah, and that live stuff is really vital and key. Player injuries can be spotted live, where human eye may miss some occurrences. Yeah, so not only is it, obviously I showed you mimicking, so it's like, how did it happen? Well, I can spot that, but also part of my role is I will spot injuries. So I will spot players sometimes getting up from a tackle, the ball moves on, and next thing I see, they're holding the neck and the shoulder. Yeah, and nobody else has spotted that on the pitch, but I obviously can. So therefore I go, right, doctor, come here. Do you want to have a look at this as a potential HIA assessment? Sometimes it's not. We're going to track and monitor it. The players clearly move, protect themselves to X, Y, and Z. You know, or do we actually go, actually, yes, we need to get this player assessed? And that's happened on a few instances. So yeah, that can be all done live. Obviously, other injuries can be assessed as well, looking at the mechanics of the injuries to help other SME subject matter experts to assess. And obviously the protocols are set in line with the insurance and the game requirements. Anybody, any questions?
I've got a couple, Randall, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
But I'm going to, just before I go into them, if anybody else obviously in the room does have any questions, feel free to pop it into the chat. I think that function is available for you to use, and then I can read them out on your behalf. Or if you would prefer to ask the question yourself, just put that alongside your question, and I'm sure we can turn your microphone on if needed, so that you can ask it yourself. So you've got a bit of time to obviously work out what they might be, because I've got 5 questions, if that's all right.
Oh wow, yeah, it's fine.
So I've literally just kind of gone in the order that you've spoken. So if there's been something you've said and I've thought, oh, I'd like to know a bit more about that, or just something I'm a bit curious about. So they might not all interlink, but it kind of follows the flow of your presentation. So the first one, you mentioned obviously, you know, you're with St Helens, but you do the assessment for the opponent as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not sure whether you answered this towards the latter end of the presentation anyway, but my question was, are there therefore other people in other clubs that do similar roles to you? Or is it that it's just kind of an information sharing, you know, protocol where, you know, because you're the only person, let's say, for example, in a certain fixture, you would be expected to share that with them?
Yeah, injury-wise, I share the information only on the injuries of their players. So, you know, like obviously with the Wigan game, that's just gone. I did actually, not some bad example because I didn't really spot any injuries. There was one which was obvious and they came to me. But I know maybe like, I'm trying to think recently, Salford, they played us again, by the way, after that. I spotted an injury and I went over to their doctor and said, doctor, spotted this injury. Would you want to come and have a look at it? Yeah. So it's actually a neutral role that I have. Although I wear the St Helens badge and stuff like that, because that's the home team, you know, it's a neutral role, and I just share the information only of player injuries. I don't show the tactical side or anything like that.
Is there a reason why it seems like other clubs don't have a version of you, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's not something I've ever asked, and I don't know why. When I ask, obviously, our doctors about what other systems are they running at other places, because weirdly they prefer the computer system that they run in Catalan, which is in Perpignan. So they're always talking about it because they want us to have it, but they don't actually have a human. They just provide replays for the doctors themselves, which still means that actually the doctors don't get everything. You know what I mean? I've spotted stuff that the doctors are like, I never spotted that, you know? And I go, yeah, that's fine. That's what I'm here for. But I actually don't know why other clubs don't do it. I wouldn't like to intimate why. And I'm sure there will be some clubs that do have somebody like me. It's just that I will never see them because I only do the home games, you know, and they'll only do their home games. So
it's bizarre considering the impact that you can imagine, you know, having someone such as yourself in terms of the things that why you're there, but also what comes out of it is a benefit to the club that you're working for. So it's a bit baffling that obviously more aren't doing that.
Yeah. I have to say, working on behalf of, by the way, because, you know, it's because it's technically a neutral role.
Okay.
So they don't always like me saying, even though I really do, but, you know, you know what I mean? It's hard not to, because you are the home, obviously, the person. But yeah, so I work obviously on behalf, but it's I don't know why other clubs don't do it. Sorry, I know it's a bit of a duff answer for you, but I don't know.
I mean, if anything, it's a gap in the market, isn't it? So actually, it's it as baffling as it is, it kind of, I think, you know, creates a potential avenue for people that work in performance analysis or are thinking of working in performance analysis that maybe wasn't considered before, and if there's kind of a slightly different slant on it, or kind of, you know, looking at ways that they can understand the role of an analyst in a very different way than what they used to, then it's another door that's open that maybe wasn't there before. Yeah, no,
absolutely, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, interesting. Our club doctor's also like he's like the chief medical officer at the World Cups as well. You know, so he has all these insights and stuff, and he obviously likes this system. Maybe that's the answer why we've got it, because we've got the, you know,
maybe.
We have some fantastic people at our place who are above and beyond quite a lot of it. So maybe
buy-in's a massive factor, isn't it? You've got to get them to buy in.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah.
So my next question is, in your opinion, can you see this being used in other ball sports?
In other sports? 100%.
Yeah, I put ball sports because I can imagine, obviously, where there's, you know, more contact in things like boxing, for example, it might be quite obvious to use it in that, but in things like football or even hockey, you know, in terms of just obviously stick contact, you know, could you see that there's an avenue for it to be used in those sports?
Yeah, 100%, especially for player welfare. You know, funding for player welfare is massive as well. You know, so there's potentially funding, whether it's, you know, grassroots level or higher. Yeah, no, I obviously, well, you know, my background, where I work and stuff like that, and speak to people in the football profession. You know, especially when I spoke to Coventry City once about what I did, they were like, "Wow, that's probably going to shape a lot of what we do eventually when it comes in." I'm like, "Yeah, it'll come in," and they're like, "Yeah, it's going to come in." And so I'm like, "It'll come in." So football definitely. You know, I can definitely see it being. I mean, look at, was it the Iraqi goalkeeper? Was it Iraq or Iran? The goalkeeper that got knocked out and played on and stuff. I'm like, wow, you know, his player welfare was out the window. Yeah. But he just needed this system to stop that, to look after him. Yeah. You know, and that's not I'm not having a go at anything there, by the way, because he was taken off and looked after. You know, but it could have been more effective, I think. So I think football will adapt it. I'm unaware if it's actually currently going on in rugby union. But them gaps may be there, wouldn't they? And like you say, other sports. I mean, I would probably use the word collision sport to start with. I think there's other collision sports where this would come in, and then the ball sports or the invasion game stuff after it. Yeah, I think there's a gap. I haven't met anybody who does my role.
Me neither.
No,
Me
no,
neither.
no,
Me neither.
no. But I mean, if there is anybody out there, I would like to meet them.
Yeah, well,
I really would.
the thing is, sometimes you've got to have that first person, haven't you, that's doing something so that you can learn off that person. And you know what, I think, not to big up your ego, but if you're the first person doing that, then why can't you be the person that people learn off?
Yeah, I'd like to think that. And I'd also like to think that other people have other ideas that could help me as well, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so question number 3 is, when you were showing us the clips, obviously it seemed like a massive issue that sometimes you have is the fact that you're watching the collisions through the entertainment cameras, if you will. Do you feel, and I guess this kind of feeds into the nature of, there's not as many people doing the role that you're doing, but would you say that over time there's more of a case to be made for investment in cameras that are purely for coverage of injury assessment, or you've got access, for example, to all the different angles of cameras at the time the game's going on?
Yeah. So when there are no Sky Sports or anything like that, the reason why I showed the Sky Sports one is potentially helping with data protection because it's already out in the public domain, so therefore it's easier just to show anyway. But yeah, when they're not there, I quite literally have one angle streamed to me through Micron. And there's obviously no editing, there's none of this. They just zoom in and out. They're really, really good, by the way. Just zooming in and out at the right times. I think sometimes they do have like a short camera and a long range, but and it can make it a bit easier. Yeah, it can do. But similarly speaking, at the moment we only get one angle. This is where maybe the funding of our sport is potentially lacking. But we are looking at expanding it, and the reason why I'm a bit hesitant is, when I speak to them guys at Macron and other pits, that they are looking at putting in. We only have a video ref basically if Sky are there or Channel 4 or the BBC. Otherwise, we don't have a video ref, but they are looking at putting in the system whereby there's a video ref for every game. So I assume if that was the case, I would then just tap into that. But I would also then maybe get one feed, which would be nice. So yeah, there are limitations to it, but yeah.
Okay.
I could see it going that way.
Yeah, there's clearly workarounds that we're not privy to. So, in the example that you showed us about, I think it was Maguire when you said he'd hurt his leg, for example.
Yes. Yeah.
Obviously, that's so quick in terms of live sport. How do you go about seeing that in terms of like, are you able to see that as it's happening, or is it a case of that is something that you would see post match?
No, I see it's happening.
So
literally.
You see that instance like as it's going on, right? Okay.
It's going on. Yeah. And this, I think I said in the presentation about, my second prodigy, Michael. He finds it hard because he's looking always at the ball. But I've sort of trained over a season a little bit. I hardly never look at the ball now, and I just quite literally look. I'm just looking all the time at players. And it's funny because when he's doing it, obviously because he's trading up, etc. And we're talking about certain things, but and I'll just go over his shoulder. By the way, you've just missed that injury. And by the way, you just missed that injury. And, but because of my practice and maybe my skill set has allowed that. I don't think it's anything to do with rugby league knowledge, because Michael does a great job. He does an absolutely fantastic job. But it's just, I think you just train yourself to spot it live and very quickly, and learn not to follow the ball, and always looking about what's in the edge of the cameras instead of the middle of it. And it's very rare I miss something, but I am human. So, you know, I'm not saying I've never missed anything. I think I'd be a liar and if I said that, you know, because sometimes the docs have come in and I go, what, sorry? You know, but that's once every blue moon. But yeah, no, it's done live, quick.
Yeah, I suppose your experiences will look for the little cues as well that you need to spot. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, them cues are pretty good. I've experienced half them cues anyway, so maybe that's what it is, like knees and shoulders and heads and stuff. Yeah.
I think that's only going to be helpful, obviously, if you've been through it yourself, so that you know the types of things that you would be expecting to see your players that are going through the same thing. Yeah. And my final question.
Yeah.
Is you mentioned around head injury assessment protocols having to be in place before games actually are allowed to go ahead.
Yeah.
And obviously, because you've said that effectively sometimes you're the only person who's in this role in a particular fixture.
Yeah.
If for example there are other teams that don't necessarily have you that are playing against each other, what would then protocols be if there isn't that person that works as the analyst in that role?
So it just becomes a computer system. So I know I've talked about the one in Catalan. Fantastic computer system. I forget what it's called all the time. But essentially all they'll have to do is they walk up, they'll go, I believe each team even might get an iPad. So they may get an iPad each that has to be working, but realistically there is a camera and a TV point in the tunnel. And that has to be up and running. So the doctors can come up and they can go forward and backwards as they so choose. So as long as that's working, you know, that's what the sort of protocols at the moment say. So whether the protocols will change, yeah.
So they've got the resource, for example, that you would have, but they don't necessarily have you as an analyst having to look through it. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
They don't have a human. It's just a computer. Yeah.
I do have one
replay function.
And it's frustrating because I'm like, I know you will have so much more value than just that. So
yeah.
I have got one more question, and then I think we've got one in the chat. Mine's quite a simple one now. Is there anything that you feel could be done to make your job easier?
My job easier? Gosh. I don't know. You put me right on the spot here.
That was meant to be the easiest question I was asking.
Yeah, no. I think the only thing is obviously when Sky and other broadcasters aren't there, I only get one angle. It's nice to have a couple.
Yeah.
I can see things a bit more effectively, but no, I've never considered this job to be hard, you see. I quite like it. I enjoy it. Maybe that's why I find it easy. I don't know.
It's good. Your investment, obviously gives your investment in something often does make things a lot easier. So I think it was more for, you're talking about obviously Michael, someone who's working kind of underneath you now and learning the ropes. And I think, from his perspective, do you tend to give him specific pieces of advice in terms of how to try and pick things up a lot quicker or, be on the ball a little bit more?
Yeah. Well, I do the first half and I talk him through everything that I do. And then he does the second half. And I leave him as a free rein, and then hopefully get him to tell me like what did you see, what happened. So
yeah, I think that's all you can be, sort of like in that mentor role. So
yeah, and obviously if anything big happens, I jump in. But
yeah, no, absolutely. We've got one question in the chat from Samuel.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, mentioned the NFL. Yeah, we did mention about the mouth guards. That's where they were originally developed, and then we're going to take them on. In terms of equipment, I don't particularly see any enhancements that the players will wear. Now our guys do wear GPS belts, or the vest. Sorry, I say vest. They're not even vest. They're now fitted into their actual finger, and that shows G-force within tackles. But it's where that G-force is because it could be coming through the sternum, for example. So that's obviously been around for a while, but I can't really see any other sort of data gathering devices being developed. I certainly don't know of any other developments, and I can't really see anything else. I mean, that's where you're going to get the head stuff through the mouth. So you put a gum shield in, everything that the gum shield measures is coming through the head essentially. But yeah, I really can't see anything from that. You know, I'm thinking like, could you do 3D modeling and stuff, and then measure the 3D models? But how accurate are them?
Just to add on to that, because you mentioned obviously the GPS units, and I know GPS units have got the gyroscope in, which gives you the directional movement. So when you were talking about the G-force aspect, if you can combine that with the movement aspect, I assume that'll be quite helpful.
Yeah, potentially. But as I said, that's not its sole role, as whether this gum shield is very much that.
Yeah, that sounds really fascinating, actually, the gum shield aspect. So yeah. But I think we're bang on 8 o'clock, so I think it's time for us to sort of wrap it up. But Andrew Randall, sorry, that's been it's been perfect, that, and I personally learned a lot from it, and I'm quite opportunistic, you know what I'm like, so I'm already thinking about how this can be applied to other things. So really great stuff, and hopefully you've enjoyed speaking about what you do, because I think it's worth sharing.
No, definitely. I'll be doing a podcast soon if I'm allowed to plug him on the Christy Scanlon podcast. I'll be doing his podcast soon. But it's this coming Friday, so it might be out in maybe 3 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, I'll share it on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Cheers, thank you. So it might help with if people have an interest in it.
Perfect. Well, brilliant. Thanks for that, Randall, and thank you for everybody obviously that came to the session. Hopefully you took something from it, whether your sport